fresh when your mother cries. Listen to the fall, to the floor.
Welcome back to another pen talk. Today we're going to take a quick look at a popular, inexpensive pen from Pilot, but that's going to lead into a discussion of the lower end of the Pilot pen range. Thought we'd put a little bit of perspective on it and take a look at what their good points are and what are some of their deficiencies. And there has to be certain things that are done to keep a pen at a low price point. So you may remember or be familiar with this. This is the Pilot Kakuno. Got this on Amazon. Got it in a fine point. Pen is not made for international use. It's entirely in Japanese. It's a very efficient retail packaging. You know, could put it on a carousel. It opens easily. The pen is secure in this little plastic tray. It comes with a cartridge and some more instructions. And they are all in Japanese. So this is, again, a pen made for the Japanese market. One of the things that is pretty common with a lot of the inexpensive pens is they're fairly colorful. They may be targeted towards a younger audience, students, first-time pen writers. So they're generally colorful. They're generally light. And I think in general, well made. So this is just a standard design, and one thing you'll notice right away is there's some holes in the back. So this precludes using this as an eyedropper. The other thing that's very apparent, at least to my eyes, is this is a familiar looking nib. It's a nice little smiley face on it, so there's again that appeal to a younger audience. A smoky clear section here. It's large. It's also has flat spots on it, so it encourages that classic writing position. And you can hold it in a number of different places. The little flare out here at the end, which lets you know when you're near the nib. The cap is just a plain cap. Nothing special. It clicks into place, a little knob there to stop the pen from rolling. And also, it posts well, which some of the other pens don't post as well. So when you take a look at inexpensive Pilot pens, obviously the first one that comes to mind is the Pilot Varsity. And this pen is well over 10 years old. As you can see, I do chew on the top. This pen is knocked around in my briefcase for 10 plus years, and it writes first time every time. This is my backup pen. So when my daily writers, which in the old days used to only be one pen, when they ran dry, I needed a backup and I refused to use a ballpoint, so the Varsity was my backup pen. So if you want a pen that writes every day, day in and day out, you cannot go wrong with the Varsity. The price point is very low. You don't get a lot of color variety in your inks. Blue and black, I think, is the primary choices. There may be more. I haven't really looked at how the pen has evolved. But as I got into pens and started looking at more different varieties of them, I really fell in love with this Pilot Petite One. It is a small pen, but I consider it a pocket pen. You can eyedropper this one, which is what I do, and this is filled with Noodler's Heart of Darkness because I like a pen that has a nice bulletproof ink in it that I can use for signing, and this one I carry around with me. I've used it for times when I'm on the road and don't want to carry anything big, so I just throw this in my shoulder bag and get on my way. This one also is very dependable in a writer. The other less expensive Pilot is the Pilot Metropolitan. This one has some weight to it, so I thought it'd now be time to bring out some scales because I think weight is equated to value by a lot of consumers. And I think a pen needs a little bit of weight to it, from my perspective, to feel good in the hand. So that's a little over 13.5 grams. The Pilot Metropolitan comes in at 27.5, which is probably about an average weight for most pens if you go through the whole range of fountain pens in the marketplace. So it feels good, and you can see it's almost twice the weight. The other Pilot that is quite popular is the 78G, and as you can see, it's 12.5. So it's a very, very light pen. Because I felt it was good to have everything in my collection, I got 3 of these, fine, medium, and broad, and the broad is an italic nib. I tried using it for a while as a daily writer, and it just didn't work for me. It just was too light. Too light in the hand. And this nib is a little bit of a different nib than some of the other nibs. A similar type of feed is what you'll see on the Kakuno, but for some reason it just didn't work for me. So that's my delving of the range of inexpensive Pilot pens. So let's ink up this Kakuno and see how it writes. We're going to use an ink that everybody is probably familiar with in one way or another. Now what I've done is the Kakuno does not come with a converter, but I have a couple of these really inexpensive Pilot, I think they're Con 50s. It has that little agitator in there, so I just put one of these on here. This has been cleaned. I flush all of my pens, so I'm going to do one draw up, down, and another draw up, down. So I do 3 draws on pens when I fill them. I think this also does a flushing action in case there's anything in the section. You know, sometimes when you clean them, you don't get a full clean. So that kind of makes certain that your feed is saturated and you're ready to go with a nice ink supply. So my first impressions right away is this is an extremely fine nib. This is a fine for a Japanese, so this is really in an extra fine variety. It's relatively smooth, but because it's so fine, you do feel it on the paper. It's a fairly decent amount of feedback. I think it has pretty good ink flow, but with this fine of a nib, you're not going to get a lot of ink down there, but it's decent. Waterman is not a totally really saturated blue, but as you can see, it works well in this environment. We're on Clairefontaine 90-gram paper. Expensive Pilot pens. We have some fine and medium nibs here. So let's take a look at how they write, what kind of line they put down. We'll put the Kakuno here as an example. You know, I'd say this is a fine line, about as fine as you're going to get. And then the other fine pen I have here is this Pilot Petite One. And if you look at these nibs together, you'll see that they have a slightly different feed, slightly different design. And let's compare them real quick to the Pilot Varsity. And as you'll see, the Pilot Varsity has a similar nib and feed that the Kakuno has. Sorry, that the Pilot Petite One has. The Petite One has Noodler's Heart of Darkness in it, so it's a little bit of a darker ink, but it also lays down a thicker line than the fine in the Petite One. The Noodler's Heart of Darkness ink dries pretty quickly, so even though it may put down a darker line, it's going to dry more quickly. And much of the surprise to me was the Varsity. I mean, this pen is 10 years old and it writes first time every time. If you look at it, it is a medium nib, and the line is definitely a heavier line than the Kakuno by quite a bit. I inked up the Pilot 78G, and this has a more classic nib and feed. This is a little bit closer to the design of the Kakuno. And this is an incredibly fine nib. This is actually finer than the Kakuno. It doesn't feel as nice on the paper as the Petite One or the Varsity. The Varsity is actually the smoothest of the group, and at least on a similar patch of ink. Now we'll take a look at the Metropolitan and just a real quick comparison between these two nibs. Again, they're very, very similar, just a little bit different in coloring. The Pilot Metropolitan is a medium. If you look at the feet on the back, the feet is identical. This is definitely the smoothest of the nibs. It's very similar to the Varsity nib in how it is smooth. And this has also Noodler's Heart of Darkness. And it lays out a little bit more ink than the Petite One does. Look at a little bit of a close-up of the writing. Yeah, it's very apparent how the medium nibs are definitely broader than the fines, but the fines also have a little bit of variation in it, with the 78G being absolutely the finest, the Kakuno, the Petite One. And the Varsity and the Metropolitan have a similar line. As I mentioned before, I really enjoy the Metropolitan. I use it as a daily writer. It's my go-to black pen. Quick look at some of the other youth-oriented pens that I have in my collection. These have all done full reviews on if you want to check out more detail. So this is the Pelicano. Nicely made pen. It's more classical and more traditional, but it has a lot of the same type of features. You know, the section has some ribbing to it and some shape to it. As we move here is the Pelicano Junior, which carries the theme a little bit further as far as the coloring goes. And this section is even more pronounced as far as giving you indications as to how to hold it. It's the same type of nib on both of these Pelicans. And then the Faber-Castell goes even further over the top in this type of a design. Again, very youth-oriented. All these pens I consider well-made. They write well. You know, you're not going to get a flex nib or anything in them, but they certainly do the task of writing. And this is the Pelican Twist, which is another pen in that variety. Nice section here. Again, they all have kind of like unique aspects to them. The nibs are all very similar, kind of a stamped stainless steel nib, but they write well. And if it's something you're interested in or sharing with some of your family members, I think they would be worth your looking at. At your favorite retailer, Amazon, eBay, whatever you like. So that's the review of the Pelicano and some other pens. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your day and have plenty of writing experiences. Bye.